The Ramban in this week, he talks in towards the end of Parshas Acharei-Mot in very strong terms, probably the biggest reason, and also the biggest reason to make Aliyah, to go to Eretz Yisrael, and also in some ways he's going to mention perhaps a reason why a person wouldn't do so. It's particularly interesting. It's not political. It's not anything. He's just talking about how mitzvahs work, how Hashem's world works, and it's really a foundational idea of understanding what Eretz Yisrael is to us. So the Ramban starts in context what he's discussing, what he's coming off of in the Torah's in the Psukim. What they're saying, they're talking about all the forbidden relationships. They're talking about not having incest, not committing adultery, not committing. I think bestiality is in there as well. There's one slight mention of not doing the avodah zarah of Molech. The avodah zarah of Molech involved taking your children and having them pass through a fire that they wouldn't come out alive from. I'm not sure what parents in their right mind would do this, even if there was an urge to do avodah zarah, that it was that strong. But in any event, that's mentioned also. And then the Psukim go on and talk about Hashem is communicating to the Jewish people, don't do these things. The Canaanim did these things. The people that lived in the land previously, or that are currently living and soon to not be living in Eretz Yisrael, and they're getting kicked out. The land is used. The Torah uses a very strong term. It's vomiting them out, because the land doesn't tolerate these sins, doesn't tolerate the sins of Arayos, and a brief mention in the Parsha about one kind of avodah zarah. They did these things, and because of that, the land can't handle them. So working off of what the Torah says there, the Ramban says, "V'titame haaretz va'efkod avona aleh v'taki haaretz." So this is a quote of the pasuk. The land was defiled, and because of that, I saw their sin, and I caused the land vomited them out, literally. So the Ramban says, "Hichmir akasav ba'arayos." The Torah is very machmir, very strict, not in the sense of chumrah like the way we use it, but we treat this very seriously, the matter of arayos, of forbidden sexual relationships. You see how strict, how big of a deal these things are, that the land just vomits them out. He says, but I don't understand. Arayos is something that is an obligation on our bodies, so to speak. It's on the person. It's not one of the mitzvahs telios ba'aretz. I would understand, the Ramban says, if you're telling me if you're talking about Shemitah, you're talking about Trumos and Maisos, mitzvahs that are very relevant specifically to the land of Israel, right? So then I understand why the land can't handle that it would vomit us out. You don't keep the land is so to speak expressing, you don't keep my mitzvahs, so I'm not letting you live here anymore. But here we're talking about mitzvahs that are not to Leos Baritz. We're talking about things that we have to keep in Chutz La'aretz as well, just as much. It's an obligation on the individual to I guess withhold himself from committing sexual acts that are inappropriate, and also avodah zarah. This is universal. So why would that be the cause for the land kicking us out? Aval sod hadavar b'kasuv she'amar. The secret of the matter, the core of what we're talking about, the answer to this question, it's in a pasuk in Devarim. B'hanchil elyon goyim. This is a pasuk in Ha'azinu. Ha'azinu is the song / poem that Moshe Rabbeinu tells us at the end of the Torah, and there's mention of previous events in history, and among them, so he says, "B'hanchil elyon goyim," when God distributed the land among nations. Or the word goyim has a very negative connotation in the way that people use it nowadays. So you have to remember what it actually means. It means nations. In fact, I think the word that's viewed as less offensive, nachri, is actually more offensive. It means a stranger. It means somebody that's an outsider. Goyim just means nations. So here this pasuk is saying, when God apportioned the land to nations, ba'afrido b'nei adam, when He separated man, Yatsev Gevulos Amim, He established boundaries. He established different areas where each group would be. Any idea what event historically this is referring to? Can anybody think of it? Babel, right? At the beginning of world history, you had that's going to be significant. At the beginning of world history, you had all the people in the world living in one happy family, and then Hashem decided to split everybody up. Everybody's apportioned a different area of the world, and then the pasuk continues, Ki chelek Hashem amo v'gomer. But Hashem has the Jewish people, His nation, has His portion, etc. So now the Ramban thinks that that's going to help us tap into this idea. Now God, and to be sure we're clear about this, God created everything. He's in charge of everything, for sure. But what He did was, He took the lower constellations and He put them in the control of higher powers. And this is an important idea. The Ramban, I don't know if we discussed this when we went to Parshas Yisro, when we talked about the Aseres HaDibros. Did we talk about the Ramban's approach as to what Elohim Acherim are? What other gods are? So I think the standard, or not standard really. I don't know what's considered more majority. I guess what we view as more rational is a perspective of when you talk about God saying, don't have Elohim Acherim, don't have other gods before me. We mean that in theory. Don't have in your mind, conjure up in your mind some image of there being other gods. It's not true. But if you tried to do it, you would be in violation of this pasuk. Right? We seem to ignore the fact that God in the pasuk itself is almost acknowledging Elohim Acherim exist, just don't worship them. Right? That other gods exist. And I'm not saying God with a lowercase g, and we're going to emphasize what that means. Right? Don't go home and say that I said there's multiple gods. So what we're saying is, God gave the constellations a certain power. Those in turn are controlled by something higher, these higher powers. And He gave to each and every nation of the 70 nations that were split up during the time of Babel and Migdal Babel. So He gave each power, so to speak, its own nation. Kochav Mazal, He gave each one its stars, its constellations. Yadua ka'asher nodea ba'etz tagminos. And you would know about these things if you ever did research in the area of astrology. You see that people thought this way in the Ramban's time. Perhaps we don't as much nowadays. We try to think, I guess what we would call more rationally. And this is certainly an approach within the Rishonim already also, that there's no such thing as it's all shtus.
Ramban thought this way in the Ramban's time.
Right.
Not people. Ramban thought this way.
I think a lot of people did also. You had astrologers, to be sure, in his time.
Just said, other of the Rishonim did not.
Right. Other Rishonim ascribe nothingness to this. They have to answer to a lot of these psukim. Right. If you're going to tell me what's Elohim Acherim, what does that mean? They have to figure out something. Should you learn the pasuk in a way of saying God is saying don't believe in shtus? It happens to be meaningless, but don't even try to believe it. It could be that's how we'd have to read it. But in any event, the Torah seems to acknowledge some kind of other powers, and the Ramban is of the approach that these other powers exist. V'zeu shenemar, and this is what is meant by the pasuk in Devarim. Asher chilek Hashem Elokecha osam l'chol ha'amim. God apportioned this in context. This is Moshe Rabbeinu saying, don't worship those other powers, those other Elohim. Right? I'm going to translate Elohim more accurately in the way that we're going to use it now. Powers, right? Not gods, not people that are beings that are in charge of everything. We're talking about powers. Don't worship those powers that God apportioned to the other nations. Now, if you understand these powers to be meaningless, fake stuff, that pasuk in particular is going to be very hard to deal with. What does it mean that God apportioned them? Made up of avodah zaras that every nation has, that He gave them to stumble in, to make mistakes with, to worship avodah zara? So not likely. The way the Ramban would understand this pasuk is God apportioned these powers to control in many ways what each nation does. And Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people, this applies to non-Jews as well, he says, don't worship those powers. They exist, but don't worship them. That would be incorrect. You have to worship the highest and most supreme power, which is God. God apportioned for all of these nations a different constellation in the sky. And they were malachim, angels, so to speak, that were in charge of those. He gave those the power to be princes, so to speak, almost delegated authority to all these powers. Like it says in Daniel, and here, these are more psukim that the other approach would have to deal with. Daniel is talking about a nevuah that he has, V'sar Malchus Paras Omid Lenegdi, the prince, the angel of Persia, that was standing before me. And another pasuk in that section, V'hinei Sar Yavan Ba, and then the angel of Greece came before me. V'nikram Malachim, these are called angels, Kedichsiv, like it says in that section also in Daniel. V'anino Sarti Sham Itza Malchei Pras. I was left before I had an audience with the angel of Persia.
Didn't it say Malchei or kings?
So it might be that right. So the Ramban would, I guess. Well, what's he saying? Is he saying that you should read that as angels? I mean, it could be you could read it either way, really, and it's communicating in many ways the same thing. Just looking here, Rabbi Chevelle, actually, this is his translation that we have on the bottom. He does translate it as kings, right? So he's referring to certainly a supernatural kind of king. He's not referring. If you look in context, he's not talking about Nebuchadnezzar here. He's actually interpreting dreams for Nebuchadnezzar. He's talking about beings that are higher, and they're, I guess, being called kings. You could, I think, translate it as angels just as easily. But in any event, he's acknowledging. You look in Daniel, we're talking about other powers that are lower, to be sure, lower than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but they exist. And what does that have to do with anything we're talking about here? Next paragraph, he says, V'hinei Hashem hanichbad hu Elokei ha'elokim, Elokei ha'elohim. God is the God of all gods. Adonai ha'adonim l'chol ha'olam. He is the master of all other masters in the world. Aval Eretz Yisrael. What about Israel, though? Emtzaos ha'yishuv. It's the middle, so to speak, of the civilized world. Have you ever heard the idea that Jerusalem is the center of the world? You ever hear of that? It can't be true in the sense of geography, because the world is spherical. There's no such thing as a center on the surface anywhere. Right? There's no end, beginning and end point of the world. It's not flat, etc. What we mean is, and that's I think why he's emphasizing Hayishuv, it's the middle of the civilized world. And now that we have North America, we might have to see how that plays into things. But with regards to the world as it was mostly being populated back then, the Middle East, you have it smack in the middle of everything. That's what Israel is. So he nachalas Hashem yuchedes lishmo. That area in particular, Israel, it was what was specified specifically under God's control. Now again, we're going to keep on emphasizing God controls everything, but what does He have, direct authority over and not do any delegating to angels? So that's specifically Israel. God didn't establish for Israel any kind of chief or guard, ruler, angel, anything like that when He gave them the land. God gave it to His people, and He Himself was the one that was controlling it. And this is what it says in Shemos. He says, God is saying, we're going to be bringing so many psukim that if we just read them in as we're going through Chumash, it could totally fly over our heads, the idea that He's going to bring out from all these verses that He's quoting. But He says, God tells Moshe that the Jewish people will be for me a treasured nation because the entire land belongs to me. What's the cause and effect there? We don't think about this so much. Why is because I am in control of the entire land, these people are considered a treasure to me. So the Ramban understands this as saying, I'm in control of the entire land, but in some ways I do that indirectly. Right? I have malachim, I have other beings, other powers that I delegate my authority to. They're in charge of those other nations. However, you guys, the Jewish people, you're going to be my am segula, you're going to be my treasure. I'm going to be caring for you directly. Right? That's what how Ramban learns this pasuk. It's interesting to note, before we go further, Rav Hirsch and after him, Rav Soloveitchik, they learned this pasuk to teach in many ways an opposite approach. They learned it to teach that Hashem was communicating, the entire world belongs to me, you are my nation, you're my am segula, my treasured nation, and that you're going to be that no matter where you are. The mitzvahs as a whole, they apply no matter where you are, not just in Israel, even in Canada, and no matter where we're living, we have a responsibility to be Jews. And what Hashem is communicating is, Kili kol haaretz, you're going to be special to me, you're going to be a nation, not in the sense of everybody else defining themselves by their land, by their culture, etc. You're going to define yourselves by the way you observe your religion, and that's something that I can personally attest to, that I can be monitoring you for, because I control the entire land. I can see everything. I'm all over the place, not just in Israel. But anyways, the Ramban, he understands that as referring to specifically that the Jews have this particular care from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not through any intermediaries. And then he has another passage from Yirmiyahu. I probably should have said Leilokim there. Yes, it's very confusing. We keep talking about false gods and real gods. It's very hard. And I probably made a lot of the shemos, so we're going to have to throw these out appropriately. But God said, you will be for me a nation, and I will be for you a God. That there's some give and take here. Lo shetiyu atem el Elohim achirim kalal. The Ramban understands that as the Jewish people are not given over to any other powers whatsoever. Now here's how we start getting into how does this answer the question. We started talking about why are arayos and perhaps a little bit of avodah zarah. What those have to do with the land throwing us out, vomiting us out? So he says, when you're in the land that is specifically designated for Hashem, right? He's the one that's ruling over it directly. So then we have to make ourselves particularly fit to be there. We have to keep ourselves holy through not getting involved in illicit sexual relationships. And therefore it also says, this is in our parsha, keep all of my laws, etc. When you do that, the land won't throw you out. And it also says, all this is another pasuk where I think it would just fly over our heads if we weren't focusing on this issue. It's when we do mitzvahs, we're specifically fulfilling our role I guess, of being God's chosen nation. That we're able to be deserving of the land that God is giving us as well through that. And then just to finish this paragraph, God is separating the Jewish people from the other nations that have these higher powers, these princes, these other delegated authorities. Instead, he gives us the land by which he himself is the power. That's totally in control. And it's designated specifically for God. And therefore the land is going to, I guess, be more repulsed by anybody that defiles it. And it can't handle people that do avodah zarah, that are involved in inappropriate relationships. Now, I forgot to mention something that makes this very confusing when we talk about it at the very beginning. The language of the psukim that they use, and especially in light of what we talked about last week, Vatitame haaretz, that the land was made impure, right, in light of all these averos. Lahalakha, we don't really understand things working that way. Right? We talk about tumah has a certain implication. I touch a dead body, it touches me, various degrees of separation. That's what tumah is. Averos don't engender tumah. When I eat treif, I didn't make myself tameh. Usually, depends on what the animal is like. But if I let's say a person does gilei arayos, and unfortunately a person is involved in a horrible relationship, does he become tameh? Does that forbid him from going to the Beit Midrash? Not really. It doesn't affect him in that way at all. But we're using the language here. It's kind of borrowed, I think, the way the Ramban's understanding it. It's even though impurity, yeah.
Or like Nida.
Mm-hmm.
Relations with them.
Oh, okay, right. So I mean, but that would be external to the forbidden nature of the relationship. If I touch that woman without actually having a relationship, I'd also become tameh in the same way. We mentioned last week, tumah is not an evil thing per se. There are times when a person needs to become tameh. He has to get involved in a meis mitzvah. He has to bury someone. It's a tremendous mitzvah. A woman is giving birth, right? That's also something that's a tremendous mitzvah, and that makes her tameh, right? It doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with bad, with evil. But the way it's being used here, kind of in an atypical fashion in the psukim, is that if you do averos, you're so to speak impure. You're in the same way that tumah, as we know it in terms of halakha, a person then therefore can't go to the Beit HaMikdash. He is more distanced from God, right? Which is, like we said, not necessarily the result of a bad deed, but averos can accomplish that same thing in a different kind of way. It can distance us from God.
But the person does not become tameh; the land becomes tameh.
Mm-hmm.
And the word defiled is probably the main problem here, because it doesn't come close to conveying any of the concepts we've talked about for tumah and tahara.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sense of completion, it's a sense of wholeness, which is lost through this behavior taking place within the borders of the land. And that's why those who participate in that behavior must be thrown out so the land can return to its civility, to its completion.
That's a good point. It does seem like the land is being emphasized, not the people.
It's the land. And why the land? What he points out here is that when Hashem gave out the land to the world, to the Yemot, or the Deus, he kept a part for himself, as if Hashem was, in addition, he was the 71st, as it were, where we were not in existence yet. Either we were or we're not. Are we part of the 70 Yemot? I don't know. We're not. So Hashem was number 71. He kept 171, as it were, for himself. And then he needed to have a land, a people, to occupy it. And he took us from wherever we were taken, from among those nations, from among the 70, assuming that Abraham was part of the 70 at some point. Then he came out of the 70. The whole concept has to be developed.
But we need to talk about that, and I think that's... Let's start with the question as follows. The idea of Hashem delegating authority, which is what the Ramban seems to be indicating, does that sit well with us? Is there anything theologically difficult about that? I think there's something tremendously difficult.
Authority in the sense that we have Bechira Chofshit, and in that sense, each of the other nations has that same Bechira Chofshit.
I'm not talking about the people of any particular nation, but God, so to speak, if I was to use the language, to act this out, so to speak. Obviously, it didn't occur this way, but God says, I don't have the energy. I don't feel like taking care of all of these nations of the world. Malachim, you guys do this for me, right? That's when we delegate authority, when we give jobs to subordinates. It's because we can't do everything in the world. We have to entrust that work with others. But that concept doesn't seem like it should work with God. Yeah. Sorry?
But it did. After the Chedai God says to Moshe, I'm going to give you an angel to take you to Eretz Yisrael.
Okay, so now we're on to something. What's that a response to? Does God say, I can't handle these people anymore, I don't have the energy or power to do it?
No.
So what is he trying to say?
It was saying that since the Jewish people disengaged from God, then he's going to follow the same manner.
Very good. Right. It's more of a I can't tolerate the sin, and therefore we can't have as close a relationship as we used to. Now it happens to be, in that particular context, this is the approach of Rashi, and I think Ramban we discussed also. I don't know if we discussed it, but the Ramban's take is Moshe Daven, and then in fact Hashem did take us out, on his own without a malach. But now let's go back to Migdal Bavel. Let's go to when the nations were split up. Okay, before that even.
Before that, where it says at the end of Breshis, I will not tolerate these nations before the Mabul. Exact language. Hashem says, I've had it.
Right, so that this delegating is not the result of Hashem being exhausted. It's a result of the nations of the world as a whole, being at a certain low level that we're not deserving perhaps of that unique relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now the Ramchal, he develops this idea more deeply in his Derech Hashem, the way of God. He talks about how when Adam HaRishon sinned, what happened was that he brought, basically, he was the only member of humanity at the time, him and his wife, but he brought down all of humanity with him by doing that. At that point, we couldn't have that direct relationship with Hashem anymore. The ideal would have been that there would be no such thing as Jews, non-Jews. It would have been that the entire world would have been on the level of, if Adam HaRishon hadn't sinned, we'd all be on this level where we'd be able to be under God's direct care. And he could certainly handle it. He has infinite power. He could do that, right? But when Adam HaRishon sinned, everybody was brought down lower, that we weren't zocheh to that relationship. Avraham Avinu, the Ramchal says, managed to elevate himself to a point where he was higher, and then subsequently his entire, his descendants as well.
Sorry.
No problem. We're fine. That his descendants ended up being on that higher level with him. And then eventually, they formed the Jewish nation. They were people that were worthy of a more direct assistance and direct care and relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whereas the other nations, they stayed on that lower level. Now, obviously, it's important to realize that Ramchal, emphasizes this also. We're not a bunch of racists. In the same way that Avraham Avinu brought himself to a higher level, any other non-Jew that feels like he wants to be a member of the club, he can join. It's called conversion. We have such a concept, right? That in that way, everybody has the ability to be under that more direct care. But at the same time, the system as we have it now is the Jewish people have a unique connection with God.
So there were also non-Jews at the time of Avraham, like
Mr. Shelach. Right. He was younger, but like it said, like Shem Vayikra, right? That these were people that were holy, right? They made good choices. It's a good question. Why were those people different? Do you need something, Eugene?
I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
Are you till 8:15? Yeah.
More like 8:10 tonight, I think.
So at 8 o'clock at the program, could you send, if somebody will come, could you send them to classroom number 3?
I suppose. Sure.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
We'll switch. Okay. Right. So I think a lot of commentaries do emphasize, what happened to those people. How come they didn't have their own, their own descendants that, became their own, so to speak, Abraham, their own, higher level nation. I think that they all pretty much dwell on ideas that they emphasize how, I think Shem Vayikra, I think people make a big deal out of saying, they didn't go out and, into the world like Abraham did. They didn't try to spread knowledge of God in the way Avraham Avinu did. They had their own yeshiva. If you wanted to come in, that was great. But otherwise, we're just going to learn on our own. That's an example of perhaps one, I think, flaw that a lot of people find in the other, so to speak, righteous members of Avraham's time. But yeah, that's certainly a question that has to be asked. Why was Avram so special? It might just even be a function of level, that they were all good people, but Avram was greater. He was the one that actually, brought the Jewish people to a certain madriga that was necessary. But okay, so the Ramban is saying is the Jewish people, and in effect their land that God has given to them, they're worthy of this extra level of care, and the other nations are not. Parsha Azos, is that what we're up to? Right, now, so he has to now emphasize, and I kept pointing this out earlier, but if you were reading this without me talking about it, the Ramban just ended that last paragraph with the land can't handle idol worship and adulterous relationships. A person can very easily, when he's reading through these Psukim of the Chumash, miss the idea of Avodah Zarah, because Molech is the only Avodah Zarah mentioned in that list of things that cause the land to throw you out. So he's pointing out, Parsha has Kira HaMolech. Why did this parsha single out Molech with Chol Avodah Zarah in Zichron HaArayos? Because we wanted to make it clear that even though we were focusing on illicit relationships at the time, we also want to make it clear that Avodah Zarah has the same status with regards to its relationship to the land. The Psukim make it clear, don't defile yourselves with you doing these averos, because that's what the nations that lived here previously did. And the land vomited them out because of that. Therefore it says in the following parsha, Parshas Kedoshim, which we're going to read this week also, I'm going to separate them from the other nations so that they should be mine. And in that context, they're discussing Avodah Zarah more clearly. So you see there that there's also a very serious matter of Avodah Zarah, in this sense also, that the land will kick you out because of it. Because of that, God gave them, the Jewish people, the land. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, "Va'omer lachem atem tirshu esat masam, v'ani etnena lachem l'reshes osa, ani Hashem Elokeichem asher avdalti eskem min ha'amim." Again, the emphasis of mitzvos and dwelling in the land being connected to the Jewish people being singled out, to having a certain unique role. Just to ask, I'm trying to figure this out myself. This past week I was thinking about this. Why would these mitzvos be the ones? So he told us why it doesn't have to necessarily be mitzvos telios ba'aretz. It doesn't have to be laws that are particularly about the land of Israel to vomit us out. It's the ones that Hashem particularly abhors. That's what really will get us out of there. So why are these the ones that are such a big deal? Arayos and Avodah Zarah. Any thoughts? Mm-hmm.
There are three sins that require you as a Jew not to transgress.
So where's number 3?
Right, number 3. We got 2 out of 3.
We got 2 out of 3, okay.
Child sacrifice would be a 2 for 1.
Sorry?
Child sacrifice could be a 2 for 1.
That's a possibility. Child sacrifice mentioned there, that's an Avodah Zarah that involves killing people. It's a good point. I didn't think about that. I did notice the Avodah Zarah that's mentioned also. Another thing that it connects to is it's family oriented. It's a family oriented Avodah Zarah. And the Arayos are, messing with the family structure of how we're supposed to operate. It's not just adultery; it's also incest. All those kinds of things. But I wonder if in some way either of those 2 ideas might touch on something deeper as to why Hashem abhors these things. Yeah.
It's more philosophical sins in that they speak towards men's relationship to the world. That's here for licentiousness, improper behavior.
It would have to plug into that and to nothing else, though. Right? I think we have a lot of mitzvahs that perhaps you could suggest that would be the reasoning.
Avodah Zarah is Ben Adam L'Makom, and it's Arayos and Ben Adam L'Chavera. So that's the only. Those 2 things encompass everything.
So we would say anything really,
mm-hmm.
and in some ways that's true. The Ramban's going to talk about all the mitzvahs as a whole are going to be ones that you'd be more afraid of doing in Israel than anywhere else. It's God's watching you, like in a more direct way. He's in the room, so to speak, not just in the house. And when you do a sin in front of him in that situation, it's a graver mistake to make. A person that does Averos in Eretz Yisrael, it's more serious. We have to explore that a little bit more than doing it perhaps in Chutz La'aretz. Yeah.
Maybe these sins also contribute to the direct destruction of the Jewish people. The continuity is broken down.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because eventually, if you have a non-female having intercourse with a male Jew, then that cuts off the line. It's also one of the things that Abraham protects everyone except people who men who don't.
In some ways, in terms of our beliefs, in terms of our actual existence,
right.
Those 2 averos really can damage those 2 foundations. Very possible. I like these answers. These are great. Okay.
It's very interesting when we go back and read the Navi and how many Israelis when they were afterwards. And the recurring phrase is Rakabamot Losar, which tells us that all these other things were there they actually were removed, which tells us why Bnei Israel, even though they were not complete in their faith, were not complete in their obedience, remained for so many generations in Eretz Yisrael until at some point there was Galut. First there was Galut Ashur, Galut Babel. So we have to.
There was a little bit of a tension that I noticed when I'm reading this Ramban, is that all these Gemaras that talk about why the first Galus happened is because they did this and that and that, and the second Galus because it's in Askinam. Sounds like it doesn't correspond to what the Psukim are telling us, the way the Ramban is learning.
We aren't deserving of that. We're warned about that.
So I was, I had my, I was wondering about it. I'm not sure how we make that tradition, work with what the Psukim seem to be telling us. At least according to Ramban's view, he doesn't address that question. But anyways, now the Ramban elaborates more. What's going on in the rest of the world? So that's what's going on in Israel under Hashem's direct care, and because of that, the sins are more severe in terms of their effect. Outside Eretz Yisrael, even though again Hashem's in control of everything. In Tara Bashalema, the other land's purities, they're not complete. The other powers that are in charge of those areas, and the nations very often would be misled, and they would go towards those powers. Now again, these are powers that do have a particular influence over them, right? But they're not the ultimate power. It's still a avodah zarah for them to worship these things just as much as it is for us. So they would serve these also. They would be straying after them. That's why it says in Yeshaya, describing the end of days, Elokei kol haaretz Zikra. God will be considered king of the entire land. Ki hu Elokei ha'Elohim hamushal al hakol. He is the God of all gods. He rules over everything. Vo yifkod basof al tzavah hamarom b'marom. God is eventually going to get rid of this whole delegating system. Eventually, in the end of days, the entire world will be under God's direct supervision. It'll be, in many ways, based on the structure we developed earlier. We're going to revert back to pre-Chet Adam HaRishon status, right? That everybody's going to be on a level by which they can be as close to Hashem as possible. And then God is going to punish all the kings of the earth on the earth. He's going to, after so to speak, destroying, getting rid of the higher powers. I'm not sure why they're considered responsible, but in some ways they are, according to the Ramban. And then God's going to deal with the actual human kings that caused their nations to worship these powers. So the Ramban is telling us now the rest of the world operates in a so to speak, watered down way in terms of connection to Hashem. That there are these in some ways constellations, celestial powers, Rabbi Shabbos defines it as, or also angels. These are things that are in control, delegated control, right? Hashem's still the ultimate authority, but there's something that's missing. There's something that's not quite as direct. So then the Ramban continues. He gives a number of examples from Sukkim that demonstrate that, but we're going to skip that. But now, this is what the Chazal say in Ksuvos. Kol hadar v'chutz la'aretz dome k'mi she'ein lo eloka. Somebody that lives outside of Israel, and this is where we're going to come to perhaps why a person should live in Israel. We just talked about why a person maybe shouldn't. The stakes are higher. You're doing a Vayikra there, it's a much bigger deal. But now, we're going to talk about a Gemara in Ksuvos. Chazal said, anybody that lives outside of Israel, it's like they don't have a God. That can't be literal. I hope we all have a God, even though we're living in Canada right now. Right? Shenemar, the Pasuk says, Lasis lachem etz ha'aretz eretz Canaan, liyos lachem le'elokim. God is telling the Jewish people, I'm settling you in the land of Canaan in order to be a God for you. Implication being, that's a requirement. You have to live in Israel for God to be a God for you. But Omer, and also says in Shmuel Aleph, Ki gershuni hayom hamistapech banachal Hashem b'morlach avod elokim achirim. This is David HaMelech talking. He's fleeing, I think, from Shaul in this story, and he's saying, by chasing me out of Israel, they're forcing me to worship other gods. Also, not literal. David was not forced at any point to bow down to some other god. What was meant was, the Tosefta d'Avodah Zarah, the Tosefta d'Avodah Zarah, I think, explains, Hu Omer, that's what's also meant, V'shavti b'shalom el beis avi. Oh, sorry, this is not an explanation, but another example. This is Yaakov Avinu talking. He says, when I return in peace to the house of my father, this is before he makes his trip to Lavan, V'haya Hashem li le'elokim. Then God will be a God to me. V'omer lasis lachem es eretz Canaan. And also it says, I will give you the land of Canaan. Kol zman she'atem ba'eretz Canaan, ha'yisi lachem le'elohim. This is Chazal's drush. The entire time that you're living in Israel, that's when I'm a God for you. Ein atem ba'eretz Canaan. If you're not living in Israel, kiviyachol. That's an important word, kiviyachol, so to speak. Not really. Ein ani lachem le'elokim. I am not for you a God. What the Ramban is communicating is that on some level, again, the Kiviyachol, we have to worship Hashem no matter where we are. Hashem is God no matter where we are. But when we're in other lands, we aren't under His direct influence as much as we would be if we were living in Israel. We don't have that relationship that we could have. The Ramban continues, and Chazal, they continue speaking about this topic in other places. This is in Kriyat Shema. I will get you out of that land very quickly. And then the Pesukim continue. This is the second paragraph of Kriyat Shema. I'm trying to recall the full pasuk. And then the Pesukim continue. What do they talk about? Right, then it talks about tefillin, it talks about mezuzah. So the Midrash elaborates what's the connection between these ideas, kicking them out of the land when they do averos, and then have mezuzah, wear tefillin. That even though I'm putting you into Galus, I'm taking you out of Israel, you should still nevertheless make yourself notable, distinguished through your mitzvahs. Through the mitzvahs such as tefillin, mezuzah, these are things which are out in the open, which we're displaying to the world. So that when you come back, this is an interesting concept that we might be a little bit uncomfortable with. When you come back to Israel, these things won't be new to you. Right? Mashal, it gives a parable. Somebody is, a king, a ruler of some type. He's angry at his wife. He sends her out of his house, sends her to her father's house. Amrala, but he says to her, he knows that things are going to smooth over eventually. Make sure that while you're still there, you're wearing jewelry, you wear makeup, that you make yourself look nice. That way when you come back, it's not going to seem new to you. You're not going to forget how to make yourself look nice. Yirmiyahu says also, make for yourselves markers, waymarks. These are the mitzvahs by which we make ourselves distinct. What did the Ramban just say? What's the function of mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz?
Practice.
It's practice. It's not the real thing. We have to do it. Hashem is telling us you have to do it anyways. He's the master. He's saying, make sure that you do this while you're kicked out of my house. But what's the purpose? Not because it necessarily has any inherent value. In some ways, I'm fulfilling God's will by doing it. So that's certainly something that I'm accomplishing. But ultimately, why are you doing mitzvahs? So you or your children, whoever in subsequent generations makes it to Eretz Yisrael, can do the mitzvahs for real. Fulfill them in their realist sense. There's no greater reason in the world, no matter political, whatever it is, to live in Israel than I think this. You want to do the mitzvahs for real, then you got to go there.
Tefillin are called adornments, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. So I think that's where the mashal kind of builds off of. Right.
And when Shabbos comes, we don't wear tefillin because we don't need those adornments.
Right. There is an idea. I think Chazal say we're supposed to have two osios. I'm not sure how this applies to women, but we're supposed to have two signs on us. On the one hand, we have our bris milah if you're male. Again, I don't know what women how we interpret this Gemara for women. And then the second os is the tefillin you wear in the morning. But on Shabbos is also another oath. That's a sign. So you don't need one of the two. Can't get converted bris milah, so don't wear tefillin that day. That's how we understand it. But yeah, that idea of an oath, of open communication to the rest of the world of what we stand for.
So that's the jewelry that this woman
Absolutely.
is supposed to have.
Yeah. Very
Rejected.
much.
Has been rejected. Is that the point?
But the mashal is, what's Hashem telling you? I know this is going to smooth over eventually. I know our relationship is going to return to its glory, and because of that, I want to make sure that we don't forget how to interact with each other. So make sure you continue doing mitzvahs. Make sure you continue adorning yourself while you're outside of Israel. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Just a thought comes to me is if we think of the mitzvot, Chutz La'aretz, or whatever as being just preparatory. Then we go back to the concept the Ramban was developing about whether the Avot kept the mitzvah.
Uh-huh.
So the first point comes of, well, how does Hashem send Avram out of Eretz Yisrael?
Mm-hmm.
He tells him, you got to leave. So if he's got the mitzvahs, since he's saying to him also, give up the mitzvahs.
Sorry, he never
Then
said to
Yitzchak
Avram to leave the land.
Abraham left during the...
Abraham left to Mitzrayim.
When he went to Mitzrayim during the fast, that was one of the Nisyanot. He was supposed if it wasn't Nisan, the Nisan was for him to go. That he would
The Rambam says that was Abraham's idea to leave.
We discussed this earlier in the other.
Not
God thought that this was a mistake. I'm not sure how
God didn't tell him to leave. It was Abraham's idea to leave.
There are other approaches that do count it among the 10 tests. Right.
In some counts, it's counted one of the
There are other counts that I think probably would corroborate more with what Ramban said. But in any event, when we talked about earlier in the year about the avos,
we're thrown out.
Right, but that wasn't the trip to Mitzrayim. That's talking about a different trip.
Yet another trip, but it was eventually through Mitzrayim, so they have to leave.
So sometimes it's a punishment, right? Sometimes we were going willingly.
It doesn't say that we leave for punishment.
I think so, for sure. And those people that they're going to go down to are going to enslave
us. We're not being punished by sent out. It doesn't say that we have to leave for the punishment.
You and I?
Yeah.
We can make Aliyah. We should make Aliyah.
No. When Abraham has said, they're not sent out as a punishment for anything that they have done. We don't understand that. It's simply part of do we?
I'd say it's complicated, right? Because we talk about it being a result in many ways. Chazal tell us of Abraham having doubts, saying, how do I know this is going to happen? So that's a bigger topic to discuss, perhaps some other time.
He created an estrangement. This lad.
If anybody looks like they're trying to come in for another program, let them know that it's done. I think Eugene's telling
the idea that the mitzvot outside of it was practice, and even the avot beforehand.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
That's why if they go in, they go out, they leave, it's not such a
And Parshas told us, we talked about why, did the avos keep the Torah, did they not? You find numerous examples where it seems like they didn't. Yaakov marries sisters. Ramban says, outside of Israel, it's fine. It's fine. And he says that's why, unfortunately, Rachel had to die. We have to figure that out also. Rachel had to die before they came back, because Yaakov couldn't remain married to his two sisters. There's numerous examples of them committing doing certain things that we would consider usher when they left Israel. The Ramban says, for the avos, not for us, but for the avos, they didn't have to do things just for practice. We have to keep practice. But so he touches on that idea there as well. This last paragraph here. Now the Psukim say, right? This is also in Kriyat Shema. In Mechayev Begalos Ela Bechovas Haguf Kitfon Mezuzos. Now we don't have to keep every mitzvah in Chutz Haaretz. We don't have to keep the mitzvahs Tliyas Ba'aretz. Shemitah, etc., has practice in outside of Israel. Now, if we understand this as what we do as a function of practice for when we come back to Israel, all the mitzvahs, their true purpose is for serving Hashem. I'm not sure if he's actually trying to explain why we don't have to keep mitzvahs Tilias Baretz. I think he's just pointing that out. I think it was probably just a parenthetical comment. We don't have to do those things. Well, you see also in Sifrei, V'yirashtem osa v'yishavtem ba v'shmartem la'asos. You're going to settle in the land, you're going to keep all the mitzvahs to do them. I think he's emphasizing la'asos, meaning like in a way to really do them. Yeshiva Universitys shekula keneged kol ha'mitzvos shebat Torah. Living in Israel, it's equal to all the other mitzvahs of the Torah. V'kahu b'tosefta d'avodah zarah. You see this also in other sources as well. V'zohi machshavas harashaim. And this idea that I'm telling you right now, taken in the wrong way, was what the Rishonim in Yechezkel's time were thinking. You have a Gemara in Sanhedrin that says the following: Shayu omrim leYechezkel. They said to him, this is after Galus Bavel. Nebuchadnezzar just kicked them all out. Rabbeinu Yechezkel, our Rabbi Yechezkel, Eved Shemachru Rabo Yesh Alav Klum. An Eved that was sold by his master. Does his master have any claims on him? Can he demand anything of him? What they're saying is, we shouldn't have to keep mitzvahs anymore. God kicked us out. Shenemar, and the pasuk says, Va'avla al ruchachem haya lo yeh asher atem omrim niyeh kegoyim mishpachas adam al asher is eitz va'evan. And your sin that comes into your mind, it's not true. You can't say, let us be like the other families of the nations, that we could serve other idols, etc. Yechezkel is making it very clear. It's true. Your mitzvahs have changed in their quality dramatically right now, but you're still chayav in them. You're still obligated to keep them. Right? A reaction might be, if the mitzvahs and Chutz La'aretz are just practice, then I shouldn't really care about them too much. No, it's not that you're supposed to not value the mitzvahs here as much. It's that you should value the mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael more. Right? What we have to do here, it's true, it's practice, but you still have to do it. In Eretz Yisrael, that's where the mitzvahs are truly being fulfilled, and that's what we should strive for, to be sure. That's certainly probably the most compelling reason, I think, to live in Israel. So you're doing the mitzvahs for real, whatever that means. And that would close this idea in Acharei-Mot. And Ramban talks about the importance of Israel. The next Ramban, I don't know if we have enough time to go through the whole thing. We could give it a quick look. This is perhaps the either the most famous or the second most famous Ramban in the entire Torah. the beginning of the following parsha, Parshas Kedoshim, it says, "Be holy." We want to know what exactly does it mean to be holy. So we'll skip the first paragraph. He quotes Rashi. Rashi says, to be Kedoshim, to be holy, means to be separate from the Isurim of Arayos, of forbidden relationships. Makes sense, right? It's coming off of what we just talked about in the previous parsha, what we closed with, those forbidden relationships. But the Ramban in the second paragraph says, I don't think it's what Rashi said. Rather, precious, what it means here is when Chazal tell us Kedoshim means to be prushim, to be separated, it means it in the same way that the Gemara uses it all over. Sheba'aleh nikram prushim. It's the actions of the people that were called prushim at that time, what they did. What is that? He'll elaborate. Now the Torah told us that there are certain relationships, certain foods that are forbidden. I can't have them. Nevertheless, it allows certain forms of these things. Relationship is allowed with one's wife. You can eat meat and wine, you just have to prepare it in a certain way. A person, if he's a Baal Taiva, if he's somebody who is a very desirous, into physical pleasures kind of person, he can keep the whole Torah. So listen, I'll just be with my wife constantly, or perhaps have many wives, and also satisfy my desires in a mutter way. He'll get drunk constantly. He'll eat tons of meat if he can afford it. Right? He's eating plenty. Everything's kosher. Everything's fine. And he's saying, I think. So and he speaks all kinds of about all disgusting matters. You have to realize, in terms of what's usher and what's mutter, the world kind of looks at, so to speak, a potty mouth, to use the language that we use, in the same way talking about having I don't know if there's a term for this, somebody that talks about explicit, sexual acts, out in the open. From the Torah's perspective, that's not true. Talking about relationships in an inappropriate way, that's usher. It's called nibble peh. But there's another type of speech that's not forbidden technically. If I talk, I talk about disgusting things constantly, not inherently sexual in nature, but just disgusting things. So that's actually not forbidden per se. But nevertheless, that's something a person can think, because the Torah doesn't ask it, I can do it. I can talk about these things as much as I want. I can tell all kinds of disgusting jokes, etc. Torah doesn't say it's aser. Most famous line of the Ramban. A person, if he's trying to get out of things, he's trying to be a Baal Taiva to satisfy his desires, he can take all the things that the Torah commands him to do explicitly and say, I'm keeping all of them, and I could live the lifestyle the way I want to. I could be a novel, I don't know how to translate that term. I could be a disgusting person, but with the permission of the Torah. So, leficha, therefore, you can't do that. The Torah comes and tells us, right after the Torah tells us all of the things that are completely forbidden, then it addresses something afterwards. It says there's something called the spirit of the law. The things that are mutter to you still, you have to be in some way separate from it. You can't be the person who has a mindset of, I'm just going after pleasure. I'll try to find the mutter way to do it, but I'm just going to constantly make my life about pursuing these pleasures. You can't do that. Yimait the mishkal. A person should minimize his relationship with his wife. Inyan sha'amru, like the Gemara says in Brachos, shelo yiyu talmidei chachamim mitzuyin eitzal neshasein ketar nagolin. This is the reason why Ezra HaSofer, he instituted in his time. We don't hold of this halacha anymore, but it used to be that a person couldn't learn Torah, he couldn't make brachos until he went to a mikvah after having relations with his wife. The reason why Ezra instituted that was apparently he felt people weren't observing Kedoshim Tiyu appropriately. He said people that were typically learned, they would nevertheless be pursuing their physical pleasures. They'd be with their wives constantly, like chickens, so to speak. I guess they're rather wild. But in any event, so Ezra Sofer said, listen, here's the penalty. Not a penalty, so to speak, but if you're going to be together, you have to go to the mikvah if you want to learn Torah again. So the world's reaction at that time, I don't think that would be the reaction nowadays, would be, okay, fine, so I won't be with my wife as much. I'll be more of a kadosh. That gezerah was mavatel, it was gotten rid of, I can imagine, because in today's day and age, a person would say, okay, I won't learn Torah, I won't make brachos. That's probably the more likely response. But in anyways, Rather, what should a person do if he's in a Kedoshim Tiyu mindset? He wants to be holy. Rather, what he should do is he should be with his wife only, I guess, in a more minimal amount of times, and he should have in mind that when he's doing these things, it's for the purpose of the mitzvah. The mitzvah, first of all, to have children, and even beyond that, also the mitzvah of pleasing one's wife. That's also important. Just as equally relevant to females also in the opposite end. Person shouldn't drink too much either. Like the pasuk says in Beit Midrash, Hanazir Kadosh. A Nazir is somebody that refrains from wine. Wine is permitted, but still, he's considered holy. That person will remember much, that person has a mindset of, I don't want to end up like Noach, I don't want to end up like Lot, people that got so incredibly drunk that horrible things happened to them. A person, and this is interesting, in the world that we live in, I'm not sure how much it applies, but a person should try to keep himself from impurity as well. He shouldn't become tameh. Even though there's no issur of becoming tameh, like we mentioned last week. There's nothing inherently forbidden about that. There are many situations. The Ramban is probably not referring to those situations of where a person has to become tameh to do a mitzvah, to do something important. That's not what the Ramban, I think, is telling. That's not the kind of tumah I think he would be telling somebody to avoid. The Indian Skiru, Big Day Amharis, Midrash Leprushim, there's a Gemara that talks about something specific that keeps that in mind. There were Prushim that tried to keep themselves away from certain items that would make them tameh. Again, like we said, the Nazir, he's somebody holy. Because not only does he not drink wine, he also keeps himself from becoming tameh. Such a person, he's not going to speak in a disgusting manner, he's not going to eat foods like a glutton. Like the pasuk says in Yeshaya, everybody, this is a criticism, all these people are speaking in a disgusting manner. Rather, what a person should do is he should sanctify himself, that he is more of a parash, he's somebody that's more separated from the pursuit of those pleasures. Kamasha Amru al Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Chia, he was such a holy individual that even he didn't talk matters of nothingness all the days of his life. These are neutral things, not things that are usher to speak about. Rabbi Chia, he only wanted to talk about productive things, perhaps Torah, perhaps things that are very much to serve a tachlis, to serve an important purpose in his fulfillment of his mission in life. That Kedoshim Tiyu, according to the Ramban, it means a very foundational idea. That everything that we learn about what's usher, what's mutter, we're also supposed to derive from that a certain idea of, what the spirit of the law is, and with that try to develop within ourselves an idea. I don't need to have everything that's mutter either. I don't have to be somebody who's in a mindset of where I'm pursuing these things. I'm living my life in a way where I'm supposed to, only enjoy the things that are mutter in a way in which it serves my purpose as being an Oved Hashem. And that's certainly an important idea. It's a very famous idea in the Ramban in this week's parsha. And I thought, even though our main focus was this sugya about Eretz Yisrael, I wanted to make sure that we got that in also. Okay? Mishakah.